So today we're going to dig into a really fascinating idea from our source material. It's basically a toolkit, right? A set of 4 objective tests designed to help you rationally evaluate any text that claims to be from a divine source. Here's how we're going to break it down. First, we'll set the stage with the big, timeless question of authenticity. Then, we'll unpack the toolkit itself and go through each of the 4 tests, one by one. Coherence, preservation, timelessness, and the big one, the intellectual challenge. All right, so let's start with the fundamental problem that this whole framework is trying to solve. I mean, really think about it. It is a massive question, isn't it? You've got countless doctrines, scriptures, all of them claiming to have the ultimate truth. So how can any of us, as rational people, cut through all that noise to figure out what's genuinely authentic? Well, that's exactly the challenge we're taking on. So instead of just getting lost in this sea of competing claims, this framework suggests a much clearer, more analytical approach. Yeah, think of it literally as a toolkit for truth. The whole idea is to move beyond, subjective feelings or just tradition, and instead apply a consistent set of rational criteria, tests that any text, no matter where it comes from, has to be able to pass.
And here they are, the 4 tools in our kit. We've got the coherence test, the preservation test, the timelessness test, and then the final one, the intellectual challenge. So let's break down what each of these actually means.
Okay, let's dive into this, starting with the very first tool in our kit, the coherence test. The principle here is actually pretty simple. If a text claims to come from a single divine author, then everything inside it, its ideas about God, its moral laws, its social rules, it all has to fit together like a perfect puzzle. There can't be any pieces that just don't fit, no internal contradictions. So this becomes the key question you have to ask. Does the text actually present a seamless, logical system? Or do you find yourself having to ignore contradictions? Or maybe relying on a bunch of outside explanations to make it all make sense? That's really the first hurdle any text has to clear. Okay, so let's move on to our second tool, and you'll see how these build on each other. This is the preservation test, and this one's all about history and evidence. Think about it. If a scripture is supposed to be the final word for all of humanity, it can't be based on some historical game of telephone, right? There has to be a clear, approvable, and an unbroken chain of evidence showing that the text we're reading today is exactly the same as the one that was first presented. You see, this test takes us out of philosophy and drops us right into forensics. It demands hard proof. Can the text's history actually be verified with real scholarly rigor? Or does its origin story kind of rely on faith and traditions that you can't really verify? All right, on to our third tool. This one looks at the scope and the applicability of a text's laws. This is the timelessness test. So the idea here is that a truly divine message shouldn't be trapped in the culture of its time. I mean, sure, it might be revealed in a specific context, but its core principles, those should be universal. They should be timeless. They should be just as relevant today in our crazy digital age as they were thousands of years ago. This question really forces us to separate eternal wisdom from, cultural artifacts. Is the text built on a solid foundation of universal principles like justice and reason? Or is it kind of filled with a bunch of rules that are tied to a very specific time and place, making them totally obsolete today? And this really highlights that core difference. I mean, does the text build on these bedrock principles like justice and reason, things that are structurally sound in any society at any time, or is it built on these shifting ethnographic laws? Rules for one tribe and one place that eventually just crumble and become obsolete. Now let's look at the final tool, and according to this framework, this might just be the strongest testament to a text's authenticity. It's called the intellectual challenge. This is such a fascinating concept. The argument goes like this. A truly divine text wouldn't be afraid of your questions. It would demand them. It wouldn't ask for blind faith. Instead, it would actually empower you, the reader, to use your own mind as the ultimate tool for verification. And here it is, the final test question. Does the book in your hands actually tell you to think, to ponder, to question, and to analyze its claims for yourself? Or does it just tell you to believe? No questions asked. And this just shows us the 2 totally opposing paths. One path champions your intellect, challenging you with questions like, do they not use their intellect? The other demands passive acceptance, completely bypassing reason. A truly authentic text, this framework argues, would always choose that first path. It would trust your mind. So, what this all means is that this framework fundamentally changes your role. You're not just a passive listener anymore. By applying these 4 tests, you become the judge, and the sacred texts themselves, well, they become the evidence you examine.
And that leaves us with a final, really empowering thought. This toolkit isn't just some theoretical exercise. It's a call to action. It hands you the gavel and the responsibility of judgment. So the only question left is, if you're the judge, where does your first examination begin?